I'm Sarah, the designer for JewelrySupply.com. I'm going to show you how to make this bracelet and these earrings in the next couple of steps. Here are a few additional items that you're going to need for the bracelet project. Fireline cord, item number BC180, thread heaven, TH100, and then memory wire cutters with carbide jaw inserts. I'm using PL781. Here's some of the Swarovski crystals that you're going to be using in this project. SD8025 Podpraja, SD8317 Crystal Golden Shadow, SD8277 Purple Velvet, SD8029 Tanzanite, and SD8390 Pacific Opal. Here's a list of the items that you're going to need for the bracelet. CL755 5-strand sterling silver clasp, RD455 sterling silver 5-hole spacer bar, BD215 clamshell bead tips, and BD205 2mm seamless round sterling silver beads. Try to order about 100 of the sterling silver beads. You're going to wind up with extra, but you'll have more than enough to complete that project. The findings not mentioned here will be used for creating the matching earrings. When I was reading off the list of findings for this bracelet, you may have heard me say CL755, or our 5-hole end clasp. Well, if you look at the final design on this bracelet, you're going to see that there's only 3 holes. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to take out, if you're counting 1 to 5, we're going to take out the 2nd and the 4th hole on each side of this clasp. The very first thing that you want to make sure you do is wear safety goggles, because we're going to be cutting wire with our memory wire cutters, or any type of cutters that has carbide jaw inserts. Now, these jaws are actually going to be a little too wide to get in and actually snip it off in one cut. So we're going to cut one side of the hole off, and then we're going to come to the other side and just snip the other side of the hole off. You're going to use the very tip of your pliers, and you're not going to be able to get very flush with your first cut. Don't worry about that. We're going to go over it with a file here in just a minute. So cut and cut. And there is going to be a little bit of some extra of that hole left there on that clasp, and that's okay because we're going to file that away. Or if you like, you can actually get in there for a second cut with your pliers and see if you can take off any more. Sometimes I can luck out and actually get my pliers wedged in between both of these holes so that I can take most of it off in the second cut. So if that works out for you, go for that as well. And then I have this file here, FL663, and I've attached one of the finer tipped files to the end of it. Now with a metal file, if you can, longer strokes will work better than shorter strokes. And as you see here, all of your filing is done on the downstroke. Try not to file on the upstroke. If you notice that you've scratched up your metal at all, you can always take a polishing cloth and get right in there and try to polish some of those out. But when you're all through with both sides of the clasp, you should have something that looks like this. And when you have something that looks like that, we'll move on to the next step. In this next step, I'm going to show you how to attach our clamshell bead tips to the end of the clasp right here. So I'm going to take one of my clamshell bead tips. Now, when you see them, they're not going to be as open as this. So simply take your fingernails, get on either side of that clamshell, and just open it up ever so slightly. Keep in mind that if you bend this too much, you can't actually snap them apart. So just open them just a bit more, just so you can work with them after you're putting the fire line through. This bracelet that we have right here is about 6.5 inches long. So obviously the project that we're going to make is a bit longer than this at about 7 inches in length. By all means, you can double up on any certain row of color that you want. So say for instance you like Podpraja, you can always put 2 rows instead of the one that we're showing here. Your fire line, you're not going to work with just the length that you need. So say for instance if I was making a bracelet that was 7.5 inches long, I'm not going to work with fire line that is just 7.5 inches long. Rather, you're going to work with fire line that's 2 to 3 to 4 times longer than the length that you're going to have in your finished length. The reason for that is you want extra fire line to work with at all times. You don't want to short yourself. You can always remove fire line, however you can't put fire line back on. So, the other thing too to keep in mind is that we're going to be doubling up on our fire line. So take the length of fire line that you have, fold it in half. Don't cut this loop off just yet. I'm going to show you a really neat trick with that a little bit later on. We have our fire line all doubled up. We need to condition our fire line so that it doesn't knot on us or fray while we're working with it. I have a little bit of thread heaven here, and all you simply have to do, take your fingertip, take your fire line, and put your fingertip over the fire line and on top of the middle of the thread heaven. Don't pull your fire line right over the edge of the thread heaven, but rather pull up on it. The reason for that is you don't want to have your fire line start to fray or catch on that edge at all, so if you pull it straight up, there's not going to be any friction. Do this 2 to 3 times just to make sure that all of your fire line is nice and evenly coated. After we have that taken care of, take the clamshell bead tip and thread that onto your fire line, along with one of the BD205s, just like this. We're going to actually make a stop bead out of this BD205. So, take the fire line, wrap it around your finger, and if you need to use a needle for this part, do that. That's okay. But you're going to wrap it right around and back through that bead that you just strung on. And then pull it tight. Leave yourself a bit of a tail because we're going to do a couple of knots just to make sure that this holds. So you can do whatever knot you want, square knot, surgeon's knot, overhand knot. I'm just going to do a couple of quick overhand knots. And to further secure that hold, I have some GL 527 that I've squirted out onto a Post-it note, and now I'm going to use a toothpick to apply a little bit of the glue to the knot right there, just like that. Now, let that sit for about 10 minutes, and we'll move on to the next step of attaching the bead tips onto the clasp.